China is facing massive internal and external challenges that are testing the Communist Party's grip on power, with President Xi Jinping at the helm of it all. From a crackdown on dissent to riots, protests, and economic headwinds, China is navigating a complex and volatile situation that may bring its government to its knees. Join us as we explore the key issues at play and examine the potential implications of these protests for the ill-fated decline of the CCP, the declining popularity of Xi Jinping. The discontent towards Xi's policies and ideals is already widespread among the Chinese public, and the fear of a cultural revolution resurgence reflects this dissatisfaction. While Xi may have attempted to change the course of history, China has continued its transition towards modernity in the past decade. During such transitions, there is a growing awareness of civil rights that leads to public movements and resistance. China experienced this during the reform years, with the emergence of civic consciousness and subsequent protests for human rights. Thus, the stark contrast between Chinese President Xi Jinping's triumphant third-term victory at the 20th National Congress of the Chinese Communist Party and the ongoing protests against his signature zero-COVID strategy, which called for his removal, is striking. As Xi begins his third term, he faces a severe resurgence of the pandemic that has led to lockdowns in various cities, as well as growing dissatisfaction that has resulted in protests at universities throughout the country. When did the protests begin? On November 28, 2022, Chinese leader Xi Jinping faced an unprecedented level of opposition when thousands of demonstrators protested in various cities across China. The protests were against his zero-COVID strategy, and some protesters even openly called for his removal from office while on the streets. Among hundreds of protesters in Shanghai, some yelled slogans like "Step down, Xi Jinping, step down Communist Party." The protests were sparked by a deadly fire that occurred in the past week at an apartment block in the Xinjiang region. The incident appeared to act as a trigger for the widespread public anger over China's strict COVID-19 measures, as videos surfaced showing that the lockdown measures may have delayed firefighters from reaching the victims. Residents across China, from Shanghai to Beijing, came together to mourn the 10 people who lost their lives in the Urumqi apartment block fire in Xinjiang. They also opposed the country's zero-COVID policy and called for greater freedom and democracy. Such widespread displays of defiance are highly unusual in China, where the government tends to suppress all dissent. However, after 3 years of dealing with the pandemic, many people are now at their breaking point due to the government's constant use of lockdowns, COVID testing, and quarantines, as well as increased censorship and curbs on personal freedoms. In recent months, the government has tightened restrictions, leading to several heartbreaking deaths, which has further intensified public outrage. The situation worsens. Soon after, in September, a bus accident also highlighted some of the negative aspects of COVID restrictions. The incident occurred when a bus transporting people from Guiyang to a quarantine center overturned, resulting in nearly 30 fatalities. The fact that the journey was arranged in the middle of the night sparked speculation about its motives. Some wondered whether it was secretly done to keep cases in the provincial capital low. In the past, when the situation worsened in some regions, Beijing dispatched senior observers to conduct inspections. As this incident occurred before the 20th Party Congress, some wondered if provincial officials were busing people out to meet internal targets for community spread set by the Beijing leadership. Additionally, lockdowns and prolonged quarantines have been known to impact mental health. China's worst aviation disaster in recent years may provide insights into this issue. What were the circumstances surrounding the plane crash in March, in which over 100 passengers died? Were there political motives, or did lockdown-induced mental health issues cause the pilot to crash the plane intentionally? The CCP's slow decline. Protests are not the only poison brewing slowly for the CCP. China is also facing economic challenges, which includes its deteriorating relationship with the US and the labor unrest at Foxconn. In addition, the country is grappling with a slowing real estate market, which is a major driver for economic growth. The property sector faces a debt crisis, with many developers struggling to pay off their debts. This has led to fears of a potential financial crisis, which could have far-reaching implications for the global economy. Moreover, China's aging population and the rising cost of healthcare are also adding to the economic pressures. The country faces a demographic time bomb, with the number of elderly people expected to reach 487 million by 2050. This will strain the healthcare system and increase the burden on the younger generation to support their elderly parents. the cause of which can be traced back to the country's strict one-child policy. These factors create a challenging environment for the Chinese leadership as they try to steer the country through these troubled waters. The success of their policies will have implications not just for China but for the global economy as well. What will CCP do next? It is unclear what the motives of the CCP are, but researchers worldwide have been speculating. Although these tragic incidents may not have directly impacted the Beijing leadership's assessment, the lack of official clarifications and indifference towards them has gradually contributed to dissent against the COVID combat strategy. Rana Mitter, Oxford University professor of modern Chinese history, told the BBC, "There's a dilemma for the government. Do they import foreign vaccines, which may look embarrassing in nationalistic terms, or do they try to hold the line by keeping the borders closed without any end date for this policy?" China recently tried to ease some of its quarantine measures by reducing quarantine periods and not recording secondary contacts. However, the country quickly faced a surge in infections and deaths, which Chinese authorities are still unwilling to accept. Although many experts have warned that maintaining zero COVID for the long term is difficult due to the virus's rapid evolution and finite government resources, cities like Beijing and Guangzhou have again imposed restrictions to tackle fresh outbreaks. Yan Zhonghuang, a senior fellow for global health at the Council on Foreign Relations, has pointed out that even if the Chinese government wants to change course now, it must first address the rapid surge of cases nationwide. The problem is that the government needs adequate state capacity or public support to contain the spread of the virus. Officials in China are afraid of the possibility of a surge in COVID-related deaths leading to social unrest. However, there is also a lasting fear of the virus among the Chinese people, who have been taught to view it as a formidable enemy for the past 3 years, and there is still a lack of effective vaccines. Rumors have been circulating that citizens in certain areas of the country will be used as guinea pigs to observe the spread of COVID if it were to go unchecked. This has caused widespread panic in cities like Shijiazhuang and Zhengzhou, with the latter leading to a mass breakout. The fear of COVID has now turned into anger, as seen in recent protests where people gathered in large crowds without masks, calling for an end to restrictions and greater freedom. This situation presents a challenging Gordian knot for Mr. Xi and the Chinese Communist Party, and it remains unclear when and how this knot will be resolved. What does China's future hold? Despite Xi's attempts to suppress oppositional forces, he cannot erase the public's civic consciousness. Under pressure from the authorities, the public may have hidden their demands for freedom and civil rights, but given a chance, they'll resurface. As protests spread in China, they challenge popular assumptions about what is possible within the confines of Chinese politics. Students have held up blank pieces of paper to symbolize enforced silence. But others have voiced their anger with astonishing candor, calling for democracy and the rule of law. Despite advances in surveilling technology and censorship, the protests show no clear leadership or coordination. Analysts wonder if the protests will escalate into something like the Tiananmen Square protests of 1989. However, China's current leader, Xi Jinping, has stacked the party with loyalists to prevent internal splits that could lead to a similar scenario. How Xi's government responds to the protests will shape China's future. It may clamp down on protesters or make calculated concessions. The recent protests reveal a deep and increasing resentment of China's authoritarian resurgence, which will pose an enduring problem for Xi's government. As we continue to monitor the situation, one question remains. How will the Chinese government navigate this delicate balance between maintaining control and addressing the legitimate grievances of its citizens? Only time will tell, but one thing is certain. The world will watch closely. Comment down below how you think the situation will unfold, and be sure to subscribe for more updates on this developing story. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon. Make sure to watch the next video.